What if I told you that you could expand those basic triad chords into something more lush and rich? I'm going to show you how using 7th chords can transform the emotion and energy in your songs. Not only that, but I'm also going to be showing you one mistake to look out for when using high tension 7th chords too. So what are 7th chords? 7th chords are a type of chord that includes a 7th note added to the basic triad chord. The 7th note is usually added on top of the chord and creates a richer and more complex sound. There are several types of 7th chords, but today we're only going to be having a look at the major 7th, minor 7th, dominant 7, and the minor 7 flat 5. Here is a chart showing us the chord qualities attached to each note in the C major scale. Now, I'm actually going to pop this down below as a free download, so go grab that. And also, while you're down there, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button too.
Thanks.
So looking at the C major chord here, we know that it uses the formula of 4-3, meaning there are 4 semitones from the first note to the middle note and then 3 semitones from the middle note to the highest note. To change this into a major 7, all we have to do is apply a new formula. But luckily for you, it's super easy to remember. All we have to do is add another 4 semitones on top of the highest note. Now we have the major 7 formula of 4-3-4, and it sounds like this. You can use that 4-3-4 formula anywhere to create any major 7 chord. Next we have this A minor chord, and to change this into an A minor 7 chord, all we have to do is add 3 semitones on top of this highest note. And this will give us the minor 7 chord formula of 3-4-3. Let's move on to this F major. Now we know to apply that 4-3-4 formula to transform it from that basic major triad into a major 7. And then lastly here we've got that G, which is a 5th. But I need to tell you something so important about the 5th before we carry on. So listen closely. So far I've told you that a major chord turns into a major 7 chord and a minor chord turns into a minor 7 chord when the correct formulas are applied. Now this is 100% true until you visit that 5th degree of a major scale. The 5th degree in the major scale is a G, and we can build a G major triad on there, as you can see here. But that G major triad does not turn into a G major 7, it actually turns into a G dominant 7. Well, what's a dominant 7 chord? A dominant 7 chord is that spicy chord that adds tension and drama, making music feel like it's pulling you towards some sort of resolution. It's made up of 4 notes: the root, the major 3rd, the perfect 5th, and a minor 7th. Imagine you're watching a thriller movie and the music builds suspense right before the big reveal. Well, that's what a dominant 7 chord does in music. For example, in C major, the dominant chord is G7, which consists of the notes G, B, D, and F, and it begs to resolve back to the C. So it's like that cliffhanger that keeps you hooked, waiting for that satisfying end. A dominant 7 chord creates high tension because of the dissonant tritone interval between the major 3rd and the minor 7th. This instability is created by a 6 semitone gap. So let's add that minor 7th interval into our last chord and have a quick listen to that. And just like the major 7 and the minor 7 chord formulas, well, the dominant chord formula is super easy to remember. Just remember 4-3-3. You can take that 4-3-3 formula anywhere on the keyboard and build a dominant 7 chord. And now check this out. All of our chords have turned into some sort of 7th chord. And there we have a chord progression that sounds more rich and lush. But I'm not finished just yet. If you remember in this course a few lessons ago, I mentioned that diminished triad chord that lives on the 7th degree of the major scale. Yeah, well, this sort of gets a little bit confusing now, so make sure you pay full attention on this part. So let me break it down. You would naturally think that a diminished chord would change into a diminished 7th chord, right? Well, I'm sorry to inform you, you are incorrect. Now, although there are chords called the diminished 7th chords, they do not appear diatonically in the major scale. And this forces us to use a chord called the minor 7 flat 5, which holds a chord formula of 3-3-4. Confused yet? Okay, well, let me make it a little bit more visual for you. Here we have a B diminished chord. This is the 7th chord of the C major scale. If we wanted to turn this into a diminished 7th chord, we would apply the formula of 3-3-3, and this will result in a G sharp or an A flat being used. But we already know that there are no black notes in the key of C major, and this is why the diminished 7th chord is not used diatonically, as it throws it out of the current key. So instead we apply that minor 7 flat 5 formula of 3-3-4, and this gives us a minor 7 chord with a flattened 5th, which in return adds some sort of instability and tension in our music, just like a dominant chord does. Oh, and it also still makes use of that tritone interval too. So when I learned these high tension chords years ago, I made small and silly mistakes when using them. But the biggest mistake was also the most simplest mistake to make, and that was overusing them. Depending on the genre you make will depend on the frequency of use. For example, jazz may have more high tension chords than say folk music, and that's okay. Remember, music is all about feeling and emotion, and harmony directly affects that. But the big question here is, how do we get it to sound good in our tracks? So inside Ableton, I have this chord progression in the key of C minor, and it goes 4, 1, 7. So I have this F minor chord, this C minor chord, and lastly, this B flat major chord. Now, these are in basic triad root positions, but let's still have a listen to it. Now let's add these sevenths into the actual progression by using the specific seventh formulas, which are 4-3-4 for a major 7 and 3-4-3 for a minor 7. So our first chord is an F minor, so let's use that 3-4-3 formula. And our second chord is another minor chord, so let's use that 3-4-3. And lastly, we have this major chord, but I won't be using the major chord formula of a 4-3-4 as it will make our chord go out of the key of C minor. So to keep this in key, we would have to play the 4-3-3 formula, which equals a dominant chord. Yes, that's right, we use a dominant chord on the 7th degree of any natural minor scale. But I don't want any high tension chords, so what are my other options? Well, this is where my secret chord actually comes to use. It's called the major 7 sus2 chord, and it's super easy to make this chord. All you have to do is play a normal major chord, move the third 1 octave up, add another note 1 semitone above that, and you can add the root here as well if you want to thicken it up a bit. And now we actually have something that sounds like this. But can you guys guess the one thing I really dislike about this chord progression? It's the voice leading that I'm not too happy with.
But Manny, I don't even know what voice leading is, and I thought this video was all about 7th chords.
I know, just bear with me. Voice leading is the practice of arranging different musical lines so they flow smoothly and sound good together. It's a key concept in Western music, especially in understanding how harmony and melody directly relate to each other. So let's take these two chords as an example, C major and F major. As you can see, there is a pretty large jump between the highest notes. Voice leading allows us to minimize these jumps by using chord inversions. So instead of playing my F major chord like this, I would play it in second inversion by moving this C 1 octave down. Now that the jump has been minimized, well, let's have a listen back to it. We're going to take this same technique and apply it to our chord progression. Now, before we actually apply that same technique to our chord progression, I need to explain how to invert 7th chords. Just like basic triad chords can be inverted, the same is true for 7th chords. There is a difference though. See, basic triad chords have this root position, which then changes into the first inversion, and then lastly, the second inversion. Now, with the 7th chords, it's slightly different. We do still have the root position, we've still got the first inversion, and we still have the second inversion, but there is also a third inversion now involved. And if you guys need to understand chord inversions in more detail, make sure you go and check out my other video over here after watching this one. So I'm going to go back to our chord progression. I'm going to leave my F major where it is, and on this C minor chord, I'm going to move this E flat up, and I'm also going to leave that last chord the same too. So let's check that out.